Hello and welcome back to the Hey You Guys film show. We're going to be discussing the films coming out this week. Before you say anything, there's a reason why we're wearing the same clothes. It's because we're recording both shows on the same day and we didn't bring a change, right? I'm here with Cassam, Looch again. We're going to be talking about, there's some big films out this week. Warcraft, The Beginning is obviously the main, the big blockbuster. I mean, this is a little bit of a disaster, to be completely honest. That's how I felt about this movie. I didn't enjoy it at all. I'm a big fan of Duncan Jones, so I was really looking forward to it. But unfortunately, it didn't work for me in the slightest. I had a few issues. It was lacking a protagonist, I felt. I mean, if you look at the kind of Lord of the Rings franchise, you've got that Frodo character who, when you inhabit this whole new world with its own set of rules, you need to embody a character and sort of see the world through their almost quite blissful kind of perspective. And we don't really have a protagonist in this film, no emotional connection. I mean, did you feel at any point that you were really caught up in the narrative, that you felt emotionally attached, that you cared about the survival of any of the characters?
No, and I think you're right, that is the biggest problem with it. You're kind of thrown straight into it, imagining or expecting to know the backstory of some of these characters, or you kind of fill it in yourself, and that's not really the way it should be done. You kind of see this, Paula Patton plays this character, and you see her in chains at the start, and then you're kind of wondering, well, how did she end up there? And it's briefly mentioned at some point later on in the film, but you're already too far into it for that to make much sense. And it happens with all the characters. So the magicians are there, or the mystics, or whatever they are, and then they've got higher powers above them as well. All of these things, which probably make sense, well, probably, I know they do make sense in the game world, where you get more explanation and you get slowly introduced to these elements. Here, you're just kind of thrown straight into it. So you can't connect with anyone or anything, really. Yes, I wouldn't call it a disaster. It's not that bad for me.
I think disaster, in relatively speaking.
Right.
I mean, there are worse films you'll see, but the budget, the expectation to do with it, I think that the fact it's failed so miserably would push it into the disaster category.
I think that there's some good bits. I'll say the CGI is really good. I really like that. I think there's bits, because it's basically humans versus orcs for the most part. And the orcs are really well done because they're completely CGI. And there's bits where you just think, oh, this whole thing must be CGI because there's so many of them, and that works really well. The battle scenes got a bit confusing because, again, that's a combination of CGI and the human characters, and that didn't work too well. And there's no real big standout battle as well, like in Lord of the Rings, especially in the second one. There's this huge battle, which I think still stands up to the test of time. The special effects in that are amazing. In this, there's no big kind of, put on the poster, put in the trailers battle that really kind of grabs you and keeps your attention.
Yeah, because I admired the way that we blur the line between good and evil, but actually that's to the film's detriment, because when it gets to the kind of the battle sequences, we don't really have a side, because I mean, obviously naturally we're empathetic towards the humans, because we can resonate with them more so than we can with orcs. But most of us. But when we're first introduced to the orcs, it almost depicts them as the protagonists, and then it plays around with the concept of who's good and who's not, to a point where you just kind of go, I have no idea who's good and who's not. And I quite like the blurring of the line, but at the same time, for me, to watch a film where there's a big conflict and not care who lives or dies is not a great thing. Really.
Yeah, I mean, this goes back to the game element of it, because in that you can choose to play as either side. So you could be the humans, you could be orcs. I think there's other sides as well within that, but that would have just got too confusing. So yeah, that, if you're sticking strictly to the game, I guess trying to show both sides does work. But when you've got big battles and war scenes, you kind of need, I was saying it before, you need a set of rules that you can kind of engage with. So what does each special power do if you've got a magician, or, can a sword wielded by a human defeat a giant axe wielded by an orc who is 10 times bigger than him? You don't really know who's going to come out on top of the battles. You don't get any sense of the numbers fighting one another as well. So I was really confused by that. That is the one part of it that didn't hang together for me. And then it was kind of hard to tell some of the characters apart as well. Like, the orcs all look similar, and you couldn't really figure out who was who in that.
That's your words.
Yeah, and the humans as well. To be honest, there's just a bunch of beardy blokes for the most part, and if like Game of Thrones does it really well, but that's because it's been told over 50 episodes now, and you've kind of got to that point where you instantly know who's who and which side it is, and you get a sense of where they're coming from, what the rules are in their own homes, and how that plays in with the history of their interactions with the other characters. Here, you're just expecting them to know one another and get on with one another and know exactly how these guys fight and interact. So, yeah, I guess, I mean, Duncan Jones, the director of this, has made some amazing films beforehand, and I think that is where I agree with you that this is a letdown because this is not Moon and this is not Source Code.
Yeah, maybe disaster was a bit strong. I spoke to Duncan Jones and I kept the word disaster out of my interview, by the way. And if you want to check out our initial reaction straight after seeing the movie, click this link now. I think it's there. Also out this week, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Out of the Shadows.
Oh, you're good at these. I didn't even know Warcraft was called The Beginning.
Warcraft The Beginning.
Right, okay. And this
I like my full titles.
All right, okay.
Yeah, I've got to be honest.
What was the first Turtles called then? He hasn't got a clue. All right, okay, so this one is called Out of the Shadows, right? Okay, good. I don't even know if there was subtitles in the other one, to be honest.
I have no idea. I mean, this obviously carries on from where the last one left off. Megan Fox is in the lead role again. It's again, sort of, I guess, sort of relatively similar to Warcraft. We've got the kind of CGI and kind of live action combination. Are you a fan of this kind of franchise when you were growing up? Did you like the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? I was a big fan, so I've got...
The films or the cartoons?
I mean, both, because obviously there was the films as well in the sort of early 90s.
With Vanilla Ice doing the theme.
Of course.
That is a classic. That I remember. That's what's lacking from this one. They need more Vanilla Ice.
True.
Yeah, I think I did like them. I love the cartoons and I love the comics as well. So I was a fan of that side of it. I always thought the films weren't that good. So yeah, and this one has introduced a new character, which I believe you know more about. Yeah,
Casey Jones, who was actually once played by Chris Evans and is now played by...
Which one?
Oh no, not the TGI Fridays one.
Well, the other one.
TFI Fridays.
Captain America was Casey Jones.
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
I didn't know
yeah.
that.
He once played Casey. Well, I think it was more of a voice performance.
Right. Okay.
A vocal performance, I should say.
So that's like Captain America. He's played Human Torch in Fantastic Four, and he's also played Casey Jones.
Yes.
That's like 3 comic
That's 3 comic films.
Yeah. And he was in Scott Pilgrim 4.
And he's going to be hosting the new series of Top Gear coming soon as well. So he's a man of many talents.
Yeah.
This time it's played by Stephen Amell of Arrow fame, of course, and we caught up with him this week to discuss his role.
There are things that Casey Jones can do because he's not a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle that the Turtles can't do because they are. You know, things in the light of day, things out in the open. So he becomes an incredibly unwilling participant on the team.
And away from the world of the supernatural, we have Shane Black's new film, The Nice Guys. Now, this is such a good movie. It's so funny. I mean, of course, if you're a fan of Kiss Kiss Bang Bang, then I can't see how you could not like this film. This is really traditional Shane Black in the best way possible, isn't it?
Yeah, and so Shane Black also did Iron Man 3,
Iron Man 3 as well.
A bit of that humour in that.
And he's written tons and tons of sort of action movies. I think Lethal Weapon was one of his as well.
Is he doing Predators next, I believe?
He is, yeah. He's in well, he's called it a sort of sequel, but I guess we'll see how that one plays out.
I hate it when they kind of don't tell you what it is when you know what it is.
Yeah.
Benedict Cumberbatch was Khan all along. We knew that.
We did.
They didn't tell you and they just kind of ruined it. But going back to this one, what's the chemistry? Did you enjoy the chemistry between Gosling and Russell Crowe?
I did, and I like the fact, I thought it would quite sort of subvert expectations a little that Ryan Gosling was the clumsy one. Because, I mean, he's got that kind of suave charisma where you expect him to be the one who kind of knows what he's doing. But actually, that kind of more brooding character belongs to Russell Crowe, and Ryan Gosling is the one making mistakes. But I find it's the very small attentions to details in this film. There's a scene where he says, "Can I have a mint?" And he takes a handful of mints and he goes to put them in his mouth and they all just kind of drop. And it's never spoken about, but it's got those kind of constant, the whole way through, those very kind of subtle moments. I think there's that great sequence where he's sort of hiding behind a car with a gun, but he's at one of those showrooms when the car's on one of those sort of moving platforms, and so he obviously ends up directly in line of the person he's trying to kill. But it's just a really great kind of sort of nostalgia infused kind of drama, and Angourie Rice, I mean, she's quite a talent. She's 13, 14 years old, and she, for me, steals the show.
Did it remind you of any other ones? Because Last Boy Scout is the one that I kind of thought, which is one of my favourite films with Bruce Willis. I think it's got that kind of vibe to it.
Oh, it's definitely got that kind of vibe. It's not quite as action-orientated, I'd say, but what this has got, which is quite a difficult thing to pull off, is a really great detective story at the heart of it, which is actually compelling, and you want to know how does this play out? But it never compromises the one-liners. I think sometimes films that thrive so much in their kind of their witty, kind of pulpy kind of moments actually are papering over the cracks of quite a weak story. But this has both.
Inherent Vice is what I think of when you say that, because that was a film that had that kind of setup, it had the pulpy element to it, and then it just didn't add up too much. And they kind of lived off the whole idea of these are these characters in this kind of world, but didn't do much with it. This is the exact opposite of that.
And this, so it's Nice Guys is definitely my film of the week. But another film I like this week is Me Before You. Now, Me Before You, it's already going to have to be called a guilty pleasure. It hasn't even been released yet, and I had the feeling it might have to be called a guilty pleasure. But it's...
Did you cry?
I cried. I always cry. This is starring Game of Thrones Emilia Clarke and Sam Claflin from The Hunger Games. And this is it's a moving story based on a very popular novel. And the idea is that Sam Claflin's character was involved in an accident and he's now paralysed from the waist down. And he's quite resentful with life, and he's actually toying with the idea of going to Switzerland and ending it all, basically. And she's just been employed as his new helper and his assistant. And the idea is that they form quite a sort of a close relationship where and she has to kind of come to the terms of the fact he might not be around for an awful lot longer.
So we've seen Emilia Clarke in Terminator, I guess was the last thing she was in. She's fantastic in Game of Thrones. I think a lot of people really like her from that, and they'll know her from that. Is she a good actress though? What is she like in this film?
No, she's good, and she I mean, you see a warm side to her demeanour. I think obviously in Game of Thrones she's this very powerful queen where you always see this facade. And I also feel that in Terminator, again, she's playing the kind of action hero. But in this, she plays the whole point, and she's very down to earth, she's endearingly clumsy. That's the kind of idea behind this. And we actually see her in one of her most kind of affable performances. I actually thought she came across really well, but you're not so sure to begin with. You almost adopt Sam Claflin's perspective, and you think she's quite annoying, she's a little bit kind of overbearing, I don't quite like her. But as the film kind of progresses, you realise she's quite tender, she's very well-meaning, and you actually sort of warm to her in a very similar way to he does. And I think that it's... I wouldn't say it's a good performance, it's an accomplished performance, but it's... I think she carries the film sort of in an adequate manner, and it's got Charles Dance in there as well, and it's always fun to see...
Another Game of Thrones.
It's always fun to see a couple of Game of Thrones characters in a completely different movie just turn up. I always find that quite fun.
Do you like these films that are generally considered guilty pleasures then?
I like a guilty pleasure. I'm a softie. I mean, I cry all the time. I didn't cry in Warcraft though, which is probably why I called it disaster.
Right.
Because it's got to make me cry for me to really feel like it's got my stamp of approval. Also out this week, of course, we have Race, the Jesse Owens biopic. I mean, this was a little bit too much of an archetypal biopic. I mean, when we've seen the likes of Miles Ahead, and we've seen Life, and we've seen, Selma, we're seeing people play around with the idea of the traditional biopic. Race, despite being a fantastic story, it doesn't really do that, does it?
No, and there's bits of it where you can sense they haven't got quite enough of a budget to do all the big scenes that they want, because they obviously want to recreate the races that were held during the Olympics in Germany, Nazi Germany, I should say. And so they haven't quite got the budget to recreate that in full. But the performances are good. Jason Sudeikis as well, in a serious role, I thought was surprisingly good.
I know, he's fantastic. And also out this week, we've got Measure of a Man, which features a fantastic leading performance by Vincent Lindon, which won him the Best Actor at Cannes Award last year. And there's also Misconduct, which is Al Pacino's latest. I think that speaks for itself at the moment. And finally, there's Aussie drama Holding the Man, which is a romantic piece set based on a true story about two guys who meet at school and they fall in love, and they have to face a lot of sort of adversity, a lot of vitriol along the way. And it's a moving kind of drama that's definitely worth catching at. But it's a strong week. I think Nice Guys is probably our tip of the week, isn't it? And Warcraft doesn't quite do it for us.
No. Just going back to Misconduct, by the way, is that a pun? Is that misconduct, or is it just misconduct?
Oh, it's just Misconduct.
What a shame.
Yeah, I know. It would be funny if Al Pacino played Misconduct.
Misconduct, yeah. That's what you want to see?
Then it would be worth watching. Unfortunately, as it stands, it's probably worth not watching. Thank you for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed the latest instalment of the Hey You Guys show. We promise next time we will change our clothes.
Hopefully.
Into our own clothes. We won't just swap.
We're not going to swap, no.
That'd be weird. See you next time, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're watching Hey You Guys!
Hey You Guys, huh?
Hey, you guys.
Is that from the Goonies?
It is indeed, yeah.
Nice.
Hey!